Auto shop janitor fixes Ferrari in 1 hour. Billionaire owner shock at his skill. The scream of the Ferrari's V12 engine echoed through the high-end garage as it sputtered, coughed, and finally died. Lawrence Harrington, tech mogul and billionaire, slammed his fist against the carbon fiber steering wheel of his $2.8 million LaFerrari. Damn it! Not today of all days! His face flushed with anger as he jabbed the ignition button repeatedly, but the exotic Italian masterpiece remained defiantly silent. Outside the tinted windows, a dozen other executives and potential investors waited, their curious eyes locked on the stalled supercar. Lawrence had promised them a demonstration of raw power and luxury. Now he was delivering a spectacle of embarrassment instead. 15 miles away, in the dim back room of Martelli's auto shop, 63-year-old Miguel Sanchez methodically swept the floor, his weathered hands guiding the push broom across the oil-stained concrete. The radio played Creedence Clearwater Revival's Fortunate Son, and Miguel hummed along, lost in a memory from decades past. His faded blue coveralls hung loosely on his thin frame, the name patch so worn that only MIG remained visible. To everyone at Martelli's, he was just the quiet old janitor who kept to himself, a fixture as permanent and unremarkable as the outdated calendar on the wall. No one noticed the way his eyes lingered on the engines they worked on, or how he sometimes silently mouthed corrections when the younger mechanics made mistakes. No one knew that those calloused hands had once crafted mechanical miracles, or that behind his silence lay a lifetime of genius that the world had forgotten. The phone at the front desk rang, shattering the lazy afternoon rhythm of the shop. Tony Martelli's voice boomed across the garage. "Boys, drop everything. We've got a LaFerrari coming in, electrical issue, owner's some tech billionaire. Priority 1. The mechanics scrambled, clearing space, excitement rippling through the shop. Miguel continued sweeping, invisible as always, even as his pulse quickened at the mention of the rare hypercar. What happened next would challenge everything everyone thought they knew about Miguel Sanchez, and force Lawrence Harrington to confront his own prejudices about worth, value, and the invisible people who move through our world. Sometimes the most extraordinary talents hide in the most ordinary places, and sometimes a single hour can change multiple lives forever. If you're enjoying this story, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our upcoming videos. Now let's find out what happens when a forgotten genius meets a modern masterpiece. Lawrence Harrington stood in the reception area of Martelli's auto shop, his tailored Italian suit a stark contrast to the grease-stained environment. His platinum Rolex glinted under the fluorescent lights as he checked the time for the 5th time in as many minutes. At 55, Lawrence had built his tech empire from nothing, pioneering data security software that now protected half the Fortune 500. The Ferrari wasn't just a car to him, it was a symbol of everything he'd achieved. "Mr. Harrington," Tony Martelli approached, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "We're honored to have your business. I've put my best guys on it." Lawrence nodded curtly. "I need it fixed today. I have potential investors flying in from Tokyo tomorrow. This car is part of the experience." Tony's smile faltered. "We'll do our best, but with these specialty cars—" "I don't pay for excuses," Lawrence interrupted. "I pay for results. Your shop came highly recommended. Don't make me regret it." Across the shop floor, Miguel pushed his mop bucket past the cordoned-off area where 3 mechanics hovered around the open hood of the gleaming red LaFerrari. He slowed his pace, ears perking up at their conversation. "Man, these hybrid systems are beyond complicated," said Devin, the youngest mechanic at 27. "The integration between the V12 and the electric motors is giving false readings everywhere. Ferrari won't release the proprietary diagnostic software without certification," added Marco, scratching his head. "We're flying blind here." Miguel's eyes swept over the engine bay, taking in details the others missed, his mind already racing through possibilities, calculations, and solutions. He knew exactly what was wrong: a faulty connection in the KERS energy recovery system, likely caused by a microscopic fracture in the main relay. He'd seen it once before, decades ago, on a prototype racing system in a very different life. He moved on, invisible, his knowledge locked behind years of self-imposed silence. In Tony's office, Lawrence paced like a caged animal. "Your mechanics have been staring at that engine for 40 minutes. Should I be concerned?" Tony forced a confident smile. "These are complicated machines, Mr. Harrington. Think of it as performing surgery. You want them to be thorough." Lawrence's phone buzzed. "The investors moved up their arrival. They'll be here at 6 p.m. tonight instead of tomorrow morning." His jaw tightened. "That gives you exactly 3 hours to fix my car." Tony's face paled. Mr. Harrington, I can't promise. Double your rate if you deliver, nothing if you don't. Lawrence turned to leave. I'll be back at 5:30. As the shop door closed behind him, Tony rushed to the work area. Boys, we've got a situation. The next hour passed in mounting tension. The mechanics tried everything, consulting obscure forums and calling contacts at other shops. Miguel continued his cleaning duties, gradually working closer to the Ferrari, catching snippets of increasingly desperate conversation. The diagnostic computer is useless, Marco groaned. It's giving contradictory error codes. We need to call Ferrari directly, Devin suggested. Their tech support closes in 30 minutes European time, responded Tony, checking his watch. And they'll put us on hold forever. Miguel wiped down workbenches nearby, his eyes continually drawn to the open engine bay. He recognized the frustration building in the mechanics' voices, the same frustration he'd felt countless times before when faced with a puzzle others couldn't solve. His fingers itched to reach in to touch the machine to heal it. But that was a different life, before the accident, before the lawsuit, before he'd vowed never to touch an engine professionally again. At the 4 o'clock mark, panic set in. Tony paced between his office and the work area, checking his phone every few minutes. The mechanics had disassembled parts of the electrical system, components spread across a workbench in careful order. We're not going to make it, Marco whispered to Devin. I've never seen the boss this worried. Miguel finished his cleaning rounds and headed to the break room. He opened his ancient locker and stared at the small, worn photograph taped inside, a much younger version of himself standing proudly next to a racing car, trophy in hand. Santiago Velasquez, his arm around Miguel's shoulders, beaming with pride. The date on the photograph, June 18, 1987, exactly 38 years ago today. I promised I wouldn't, Miguel whispered to the photograph. But some promises need to be broken. He closed the locker and walked with newfound purpose toward the LaFerrari. The mechanics barely noticed as he approached, too absorbed in their failing efforts. Excuse me, Miguel said, his voice rough from disuse. I think I might know what's wrong. Marco glanced up, irritated at the interruption. Not now, Miguel. We're in the middle of a crisis. It's the KERS relay, Miguel continued, undeterred. There's a microfracture causing intermittent connection loss. The diagnostic computer reads it as multiple system failures. The mechanics exchanged confused looks. Devin snorted. No offense, Miguel, but this isn't like sweeping floors. This is a $3 million hypercar with technology you wouldn't understand. Miguel nodded, accepting the dismissal. He turned to leave, but paused as Tony emerged from his office, phone in hand, face ashen. Harrington just called. He's bringing the investors here instead, wants to show them skilled American craftsmanship at work. They'll be here in an hour. Boss, we need more time, Marco pleaded. We haven't even isolated the problem yet. Tony's eyes landed on Miguel. What are you doing standing around? Floors need mopping in the customer area. Miguel met his employer's gaze. I can fix the car. A beat of silence, then laughter from the mechanics. This isn't the time for jokes, Tony said sharply. 1 hour, Miguel said, his voice gaining strength. Give me 1 hour with the car, alone. If I can't fix it, I'll resign. No severance, no questions asked. You're serious? Tony looked incredulous. Miguel nodded once, eyes unwavering. Boss, you can't be considering this, Marco protested. No offense to Miguel, but he's a janitor. Tony looked at his watch, then at the disassembled parts, then back at Miguel's calm, confident face. In 20 years, he'd never heard the janitor ask for anything. 1 hour, Tony decided. Everyone else clean this place up. If Harrington's bringing investors, I want this shop spotless. As the mechanics reluctantly stepped away, Miguel approached the Ferrari with reverence. He removed his worn work jacket, carefully folded it, and placed it aside. With slow, deliberate movements, he rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms marked with old burn scars. You'll need the diagnostic computer, Devin said, reluctantly offering the tablet. Miguel shook his head. No, just my hands and ears. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn leather case. Inside were precision tools unlike anything the mechanics had seen before, custom-made, perfectly maintained despite their obvious age. What the hell kind of janitor carries those? Marco whispered to Devin as they watched from across the shop. Miguel placed his palm on the Ferrari's engine, closed his eyes, and listened. To the mechanics watching, it seemed almost like a communion between man and machine. Then, with swift, precise movements, Miguel began to work. The hour that followed would change everything at Martelli's auto shop forever. Lawrence Harrington's black Mercedes Maybach pulled into the parking lot precisely at 5:30 p.m. Behind it, two luxury SUVs disgorged a group of Japanese businessmen in impeccable suits. Lawrence led them toward the shop entrance, talking animatedly, projecting confidence he didn't feel. His assistant had called ahead, and Tony's cryptic response, "We're working on a solution," had done nothing to calm his nerves. Inside, the shop was transformed. All workbenches cleaned, floors spotless, tools organized. The Ferrari sat in the center of the main bay, hood closed, gleaming under the lights. The mechanics stood in a semicircle, expressions unreadable. Tony waited by the entrance, straightening his shirt as the door opened. "Mr. Harrington, welcome back," Tony said, stepping forward to shake hands. "Gentlemen, welcome to Martellas." Lawrence made quick introductions. "These gentlemen represent Takashi Investments. They're considering a substantial stake in my company." His eyes darted to the Ferrari. "I trust my car is ready." Before Tony could answer, the oldest of the Japanese visitors, Mr. Takashi himself, stepped forward. "Beautiful machine. 6.3-liter V12 with hybrid KERS system, if I'm not mistaken. 950 combined horsepower, only 499 ever made." Lawrence nodded, pleased. "You know your cars, Mr. Takashi." "I collect them," the older man replied, "but I have not yet acquired a Ferrari. I would very much like to see it in action." Lawrence's smile tightened. He looked questioningly at Tony. Tony hesitated, then turned toward the workstation. "Miguel." From behind the Ferrari, Miguel emerged, wiping his hands on a clean rag. His blue coveralls were spotted with grease, but his posture was different, straight-backed, confident. The room fell silent as he approached. "Your car is ready, Mr. Harrington," Miguel said, offering the key fob. Lawrence stared at the janitor in confusion, then at Tony. "Is this some kind of joke, Mr. Harrington?" Tony began. "I know this seems unusual." "Unusual?" Lawrence interrupted. "I brought you a multi-million-dollar hypercar, and you had the janitor work on it." A murmur ran through the Japanese investors. Mr. Takashi studied Miguel with curious eyes. Miguel stood silently, neither offended nor apologetic, the key still extended in his hand. Lawrence turned to Tony, face flushing. "This is completely unacceptable. I'll be speaking with my attorney about this." "Mr. Harrington," Miguel's voice cut through the tension. "The KERS relay had a microfracture causing cascade failures across the electrical system. I replaced it with a custom-fabricated part that will outlast the original. The hybrid synchronization is also improved. You'll find the torque curve is smoother between 4,000 and 6,000 RPM now." The technical details, delivered with quiet authority, silenced Lawrence mid-protest. He stared at Miguel, reassessing. "That's very specific." Miguel nodded once. "I also balanced your throttle bodies and adjusted the cam timing. They were within factory specs, but not optimal." Mr. Takashi stepped forward. "You identified and repaired all this in 1 hour. 53 minutes, Miguel corrected gently. A slow smile spread across Mr. Takashi's face. He turned to Lawrence. "In Japan, we have a concept called shokunin, master craftsmen who pursue perfection in their work. It is considered a great honor to meet such a person." He bowed slightly to Miguel. "I would very much like to see the results of your work." Lawrence hesitated, caught between skepticism and the evident respect of his most important potential investor. Finally, he reached for the key fob. "Let's find out if these repairs are as good as claimed." He approached the Ferrari and opened the driver's door. The interior welcomed him with the rich smell of leather and carbon fiber. He settled into the seat, inserted the key, and pressed the ignition button. The V12 engine roared to life instantly, its sound a perfect mechanical symphony that filled the shop. Lawrence's eyes widened as he revved the engine, hearing none of the hesitation or misfiring that had plagued it earlier. The Japanese investors nodded appreciatively, exchanging impressed glances. Lawrence stepped out of the car, leaving it running. "How did you do this?" he asked Miguel directly. Miguel shrugged slightly. "I listened to what the car was telling me." "Who are you, really?" Lawrence pressed. Before Miguel could answer, Mr. Takashi spoke again. "I believe I know." He stepped closer to Miguel, studying his face. "The eyes do not change even after many years. You are Miguel Sanchez, yes, from Scuderia Valencia Racing Team?" Miguel's calm expression flickered with surprise. Mr. Takashi smiled in triumph. "I thought so. I was at Suzuka in 1987 when your cars finished first and third. Your engine designs were revolutionary." The mechanics exchanged shocked glances. Devin mouthed to Marco, "Racing Team?" Lawrence looked between them, confused. "I don't understand. What racing team?" Mr. Takashi turned to him. "In the 1980s, Scuderia Valencia was a small but brilliant racing team. They achieved the impossible, defeating much larger teams with far smaller budgets. This man," he gestured to Miguel, "was their chief engineer and designer, a genius with engines." All eyes turned to Miguel, who stood uncomfortably in the spotlight. Is this true? Tony asked, stunned. Miguel nodded slowly. A long time ago. What happened? Lawrence asked, genuinely curious now. How does someone go from racing engineer to? He gestured vaguely at Miguel's janitor uniform. Miguel's eyes darkened. A driver died in a car I designed. His voice was flat, emotionless, but his eyes revealed the depth of old pain. There was a lawsuit. I lost everything. A heavy silence fell over the shop. It wasn't your fault, Mr. Takashi said gently. I remember the investigation. The driver ignored team orders, pushed beyond the safety parameters. Miguel shook his head. I should have built it differently, made it impossible to override the safety systems. Lawrence was staring at Miguel with new eyes. So you've been working as a janitor all these years with your skills? It's honest work, Miguel replied simply. And I made a promise to never work on racing engines again. But my Ferrari isn't a racing engine, Lawrence said, a smile slowly spreading across his face. Miguel returned the smile faintly. A technicality I allowed myself today. Lawrence turned to Tony. How much do I owe you for the repair? Tony, still processing the revelations about his janitor, fumbled for words. The labor rate is $175 an hour plus parts. Double it, Lawrence said firmly. And the payment goes directly to Miguel. Miguel shook his head. Not necessary. I'm employed by Mr. Martelli. Then consider it a bonus, Lawrence insisted. He turned to the Japanese investors. Gentlemen, shall we take this magnificent machine for a proper test drive? I believe there's much more to discuss about our potential partnership. Mr. Takashi nodded, visibly impressed. Indeed, but first, he turned to Miguel and bowed deeply, it would be my honor if you would explain exactly what you did to repair this masterpiece, one craftsman to another. Miguel hesitated, then nodded. For the first time in years, he began to speak freely about engines, his quiet voice growing animated as he detailed the Ferrari's systems. The investors gathered around, listening intently, asking questions that revealed their own technical knowledge. Lawrence stepped aside, watching the scene with curiosity. Tony joined him. Did you know? Lawrence asked quietly. About his background? Tony shook his head. Not a clue. He's worked here for almost 15 years. Keeps to himself, never mentioned anything about racing or engineering. You have a diamond in your shop and you've been using it to sweep floors, Lawrence remarked. Tony winced. Seems that way. Lawrence's phone buzzed with a message. He checked it, then looked up with a satisfied smile. My assistant confirms that Mr. Takashi just messaged his financial team. They're proceeding with the investment, full amount, better terms than we discussed. Congratulations, Tony said. It seems I owe some of that to your janitor, Lawrence replied thoughtfully. If the car hadn't performed perfectly, he let the implication hang in the air. If you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more stories like this one. Across the shop, Miguel was demonstrating something to Mr. Takashi, using his hands to illustrate a concept. For the first time in years, his face was animated, his posture straight, as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. I have a proposition for both of you, Lawrence said suddenly. Both of us? Tony asked. You and Miguel. Lawrence turned to face Tony fully. I've been looking to diversify my investments. Luxury automotive services for high-end clients is a growing market. Tony blinked, catching on quickly. You want to invest in my shop. I want to transform your shop, Lawrence corrected. State-of-the-art equipment, specialized training, exclusive clientele. With the right expertise, he nodded toward Miguel, you could become the premier destination for exotic car maintenance in 3 states. Tony's eyes widened. That would take serious capital. Which I have, Lawrence replied simply. And today showed me there's talent here worth investing in. He glanced at Miguel again. Assuming he's willing to come out of retirement. That's his decision, Tony said, but I'd hire him as head mechanic in a heartbeat. Lawrence nodded. Talk to him, I'll have my team draw up a proposal. He checked his watch. For now, I should get my investors on the road. The LaFerrari makes quite an impression at sunset. As Lawrence walked away to gather the Japanese businessmen, Tony stood rooted to the spot, mind racing with possibilities. Across the shop, Miguel finished his explanation. Mr. Takashi clasped his shoulder warmly. The world lost a great talent when you stepped away, the older man said. Perhaps it is time to reconsider your promise. Miguel shook his head. Some mistakes can't be undone. All due respect, Mr. Takashi said gently, but hiding your gift, that may be the greater mistake. Before Miguel could respond, Lawrence called the investors together. They thanked Miguel warmly, each bowing respectfully before following Lawrence outside. The sound of the Ferrari's engine echoed through the shop as it roared to life, then gradually faded as Lawrence drove away. In the sudden quiet, Miguel became aware of the mechanic staring at him. He turned away uncomfortably, reaching for his broom. "What are you doing?" Tony asked, approaching. "Finishing my shift," Miguel replied simply. Tony shook his head. "I think we need to talk first, in my office." As they walked away, Devin turned to Marco. "Did that just happen?" "Our janitor is some kind of legendary racing engineer." Marco nodded slowly. "Makes you think, doesn't it, how many people we pass every day without knowing their story?" In Tony's cluttered office, Miguel sat stiffly in the visitor's chair. Tony leaned against his desk, arms crossed. 15 years, Tony said. 15 years you've worked for me and I never knew." Miguel shrugged. "It wasn't relevant to mopping floors." "Why here? Why a janitor?" Miguel was silent for a long moment. "After the accident, after the lawsuits, I needed simplicity, no responsibilities, no decisions that could hurt anyone. But all that talent," Tony pressed, "is precisely what caused the problem," Miguel finished firmly. "Santiago Velasquez was 26 years old when he died in my car. He had a fiancée, plans for the future." Understanding dawned on Tony's face. "So you punished yourself." Miguel looked away. "I made a choice." "Well, I'm offering you a different choice now," Tony said. "Lawrence Harrington wants to invest in the shop, transform it into a high-end exotic car service center. He wants you as the head mechanic." Miguel shook his head immediately. "I can't. Can't or won't," Tony challenged. "Because what I saw today wasn't a man who can't. I saw someone come alive when his hands were on that engine." Miguel stood abruptly. "I should finish my shift," Tony sighed. "The offer stands. Think about it at least." Miguel paused at the door. "The accident wasn't really my fault, was it? From what I just heard? No, doesn't sound like it." Miguel nodded once and left, closing the door quietly behind him. The next morning, Miguel arrived at his usual time, 5:30 a.m., to clean the shop before the mechanics arrived at 8. He was surprised to find Tony's car already in the lot. Inside, Tony sat at his desk, surrounded by paperwork, looking like he hadn't slept. "You're early," Miguel observed. Tony looked up. "Couldn't sleep. Harrington sent over his proposal last night." He held up a thick document. "It's substantial." Miguel nodded and reached for his broom. "He specifically asks for you by name," Tony continued. "As head of mechanical operations." Miguel paused. "I told you my answer." "Read it first," Tony said, holding out the document. "You owe yourself that much." Reluctantly, Miguel took the proposal and began to read. As he turned the pages, his expression shifted from reluctance to surprise to thoughtful consideration. "This is more than just an investment," he said finally. Tony nodded eagerly. "It's a complete transformation, new equipment, training programs, even a separate racing division for vintage and modern race cars." His eyes gleamed with excitement. "We'd be working on machines most mechanics only dream about." Miguel handed the document back. "It's a good opportunity. For you." Tony's face fell. "Damn it, Miguel, this is for both of us. Harrington made that clear." "I can't," Miguel said, but with less conviction than before. "Santiago Velasquez," Tony said quietly. "That was the driver's name, right?" Miguel stiffened. "Yes. I looked him up last night. Did you know his family established a racing school in his memory? They train young drivers about safety, about respecting the machines." Tony leaned forward. "They don't blame you, Miguel. Maybe it's time you stopped blaming yourself." Miguel turned away, emotion crossing his face. "It's not that simple." "Nothing worthwhile ever is," Tony replied. "But hiding your gift, that doesn't honor his memory either." Before Miguel could respond, the shop door opened, and to their surprise, Lawrence Harrington walked in, dressed more casually than the day before in slacks and a polo shirt. "Good morning," he called. "Hope I'm not too early." Tony hurried over. "Not at all, Mr. Harrington. We were just discussing your proposal." Lawrence nodded. And his eyes shifted to Miguel. "I need time to think," Miguel said honestly. "Fair enough," Lawrence replied, "but maybe this will help your decision." He gestured toward the door. "I brought something I thought might interest you." Curious, Miguel and Tony followed him outside. Parked next to Lawrence's Mercedes was a car covered with a tarp. With a flourish, Lawrence pulled it off, revealing a sleek, low-slung race car in faded red and yellow livery. The Scuderia Valencia logo was still visible on the side. Miguel stopped in his tracks, his face draining of color. "The Valencia Mark IV," he whispered. "How did you?" "I made some calls last night," Lawrence said with a satisfied smile. "This has been sitting in a collector's warehouse in Monaco for the last 20 years. He agreed to sell when I told him I'd found the man who designed it." Miguel approached the car slowly, almost reverently. His hand hovered over the bodywork, not quite touching it. "This is chassis number 3, he said softly. "We won Monza with this car." Lawrence nodded. September 1986, by 12 seconds, a huge margin. Miguel looked at him questioningly. I did my research, Lawrence explained. I wanted to understand who I was dealing with. Why go to this trouble? Miguel asked. Lawrence considered his answer carefully. Yesterday, I watched you transform my Ferrari in less than an hour. You didn't just fix it, you improved it. That kind of talent is rare. He gestured to the race car. But more than that, I saw a man reconnect with his passion, and it reminded me of something I'd forgotten in my own success. What's that? Tony asked. That the most valuable asset in any business isn't the machinery or the money, it's the people who pour their soul into their work. Lawrence turned back to Miguel. This car is yours, by the way. Consider it a signing bonus. Miguel shook his head, overwhelmed. I can't accept. You can and you will, Lawrence interrupted firmly. Because this car deserves to be with the man who gave it life, and because, he added with a knowing smile, you're already thinking about how to restore it, aren't you? Miguel couldn't deny it. His mind was already cataloging what would be needed: parts, tools, time. I still don't understand why you're doing this, he said. Lawrence's expression turned more serious. Yesterday taught me a valuable lesson about making assumptions. I judged you based on your job title, not your capabilities. That's a mistake I don't intend to repeat. He extended his hand. So, Miguel Sanchez, will you help me build something exceptional? Miguel looked at the hand, then at Tony's hopeful face, then at the race car that represented both his greatest achievements and his deepest regrets. The machine that had defined him, then broken him, now offered a path to redemption. Slowly, he reached out and shook Lawrence's hand. I'll need to make some conditions, he said. Name them, Lawrence replied. A training program for underprivileged youth, mechanical scholarships. Miguel's voice grew stronger. And safety innovation research. Lawrence nodded, impressed. Done, and done. Anything else? Miguel looked at the race car again. I want to restore this myself, in my own time, my own way. It's your car, Lawrence said simply. Do with it what you will. Tony clapped his hands together. So we have a deal? Miguel took a deep breath and nodded. We have a deal. Lawrence's smile widened. Excellent. I've already scheduled a meeting with architects next week. We'll need to expand the facility considerably. He checked his watch. I should go. My investors are waiting for a conference call. They're very eager to proceed after yesterday's demonstration. As Lawrence walked back to his Mercedes, Tony turned to Miguel, barely containing his excitement. Can you believe this is happening? Miguel's eyes remained on the race car. It still doesn't feel real. Well, you better start believing it, Tony said, because I'm going to need you to help plan the new shop layout, equipment lists. He trailed off, noticing Miguel's distant expression. What is it? Miguel ran his hand along the race car's bodywork, finally allowing himself to touch it. Santiago would have been 63 this year, same age as me. Tony placed a hand on his shoulder. Maybe it's time to live for both of you. Miguel nodded slowly. Maybe it is. In the weeks that followed, Martelli's auto shop underwent a transformation. Construction crews expanded the facility, adding specialized bays for exotic cars, a dedicated diagnostics center, and a separate building for the racing division. State-of-the-art equipment arrived daily, and Tony spent hours in meetings with contractors, suppliers, and marketing specialists. Miguel, meanwhile, stepped into his new role with a mix of trepidation and growing confidence. The mechanics who had once dismissed him now watched in awe as he diagnosed complex problems in minutes, his hands moving with practiced precision, his explanations clear and patient. Word spread quickly through the high-end automotive community. First came the Lamborghinis and Aston Martins, followed by rare classics and modern hypercars. Each satisfied customer told others, and soon they had a waiting list despite their premium prices. Lawrence visited regularly, often bringing potential clients or investors to witness the magic firsthand. He never failed to introduce Miguel as our engineering genius, taking visible pride in the older man's growing reputation. After hours, Miguel worked on the Valencia Mark IV, meticulously restoring it piece by piece. Sometimes Tony would find him in the workshop late at night, surrounded by parts, completely absorbed in his work. Other times, he would catch Miguel simply sitting in the cockpit, eyes closed, lost in memories. 4 months after their agreement, the official grand opening of Martelli and Sanchez Performance Engineering took place. The expanded facility gleamed with new equipment and a select group of guests, exotic car owners, racing enthusiasts, and local business leaders, gathered for the ceremony. Lawrence Harrington stood at the podium, addressing the crowd. When I first came to this shop with a broken Ferrari, I had no idea I was about to witness something extraordinary. I certainly had no idea I'd end up as a business partner. Laughter rippled through the audience. But sometimes the most valuable discoveries happen when we look past titles and appearances to see the true potential in people. He gestured to where Miguel stood uncomfortably in a new shirt and tie, looking like he'd rather be under a car than in the spotlight. Miguel Sanchez was once renowned in the racing world for his engineering brilliance. Then, for reasons of his own, he stepped away from that life. For 15 years, he worked as a janitor in this very shop, his talents hidden, his genius unrecognized. Lawrence paused, letting that sink in. Until one day, when an arrogant billionaire, that would be me, needed a miracle. More laughter from the crowd. What happened next changed multiple lives, including mine. It reminded me that true excellence doesn't come with a title or a paycheck. It comes from passion, from dedication, from the pursuit of perfection for its own sake. Lawrence raised his glass. To Miguel Sanchez, who taught me that valuable lesson. To Tony Martelli, who had the wisdom to see potential where others missed it. And to new beginnings for us all. The crowd applauded as Tony and Miguel joined Lawrence at the podium. Cameras flashed, recording the moment for local business publications. As the celebration continued, Miguel slipped away from the crowd, seeking a moment of quiet. He found himself in the racing division, standing before the now-restored Valencia Mark IV, gleaming under the lights. "She looks magnificent," a voice said behind him. Miguel turned to find Mr. Takashi, who had flown in specifically for the opening. "Thank you," Miguel replied. "It took some doing to find original parts." Mr. Takashi nodded, running an appreciative hand along the car's curves. "Will you race her again?" Miguel shook his head. "No, but I've been in contact with the Velázquez Foundation. After the exhibition here, she'll go to their museum, where people can learn from her." "A fitting tribute," Mr. Takashi approved. "And what of Miguel Sanchez? Has he found peace with his past?" Miguel considered the question carefully. "I'm learning to forgive myself day by day. And your future? Lawrence tells me you've designed several new diagnostic systems already." A small smile touched Miguel's lips. "I've had ideas stored up for a long time. The world will be better for them," Mr. Takashi said sincerely, "and for your return to your true calling." Before Miguel could respond, a commotion near the entrance caught their attention. A group of people entered the racing division, surrounding someone Miguel couldn't see. Then the crowd parted, and an elderly man in a wheelchair came into view, pushed by a middle-aged woman. Miguel froze, recognition and disbelief washing over his face. The woman spotted him and leaned down to speak to the man in the wheelchair. He looked up. Their eyes met across the room, and time seemed to stand still. "Miguel," the elderly man said, his voice still carrying the hint of a Spanish accent. "It has been too long, my friend." "Carlos," Miguel whispered, barely able to speak. "Carlos Velázquez," Santiago's father nodded, his eyes shining with emotion. "When Lawrence Harrington contacted our foundation about the car, I could hardly believe it. After all these years." Miguel stood rooted to the spot, overwhelmed. Carlos Velázquez had been the founder of Scuderia Valencia, the man who had given Miguel his first chance, who had believed in him when no one else did. And after Santiago's death, the man whose trust he had betrayed most deeply. Carlos gestured to his daughter. "You remember Lucia? She runs the foundation now." Lucia stepped forward, extending her hand. "It's good to see you again, Miguel. It's been too long." Miguel took her hand numbly. "I never thought, after what happened." Carlos waved away his words. "Too many years have passed for such old grief. I am an old man now. I do not wish to carry anger to my grave." "I should have reached out," Miguel said, regret heavy in his voice. "I wanted to, but fear is a powerful thing," Carlos finished for him. "For both of us, but Lawrence Harrington is very persuasive." His eyes twinkled. "And very persistent." Miguel glanced across the room where Lawrence stood watching the reunion with satisfaction. "He didn't tell me you were coming." "He wanted it to be a surprise," Lucia explained. "And we wanted to see the car." "Father has been following your restoration progress through the photos Lawrence sent." Carlos wheeled himself closer to the Valencia Mark IV, inspecting it with expert eyes. "Beautiful work. You've lost none of your touch." "It was built well to begin with," Miguel replied. Carlos smiled at the compliment. "We made magic together once, didn't we?" "Yes," Miguel agreed softly. "We did. And now you begin a new chapter." Carlos reached out and clasped Miguel's hand firmly. "Santiago would have approved. He never blamed you, not even at the end." Miguel's composure finally broke. Tears welled in his eyes as decades of guilt and self-recrimination confronted the simple forgiveness in Carlos's face. "I've missed you," he managed to say. "All of you, the team, the work." "And we missed you," Carlos replied. "The world of racing was poorer without Miguel Sanchez." Lucia touched her father's shoulder. "We should let Miguel return to his guests." "There will be time to talk more tomorrow." Carlos nodded. "Yes, tomorrow. Perhaps you could show me your new facility. An old racing man like me still appreciates fine engineering." I would be honored, Miguel said sincerely. As Carlos and Lucia moved away to examine the car more closely, Lawrence approached Miguel. I hope you don't mind the surprise, he said. When I contacted the Velázquez Foundation about the car, it seemed like an opportunity to heal old wounds. Miguel shook his head, still processing. Thank you, I never thought I'd see him again. Lawrence smiled. Second chances don't come along every day, I'm learning that myself. He glanced around the bustling new facility. 6 months ago, I was just another tech billionaire with fancy toys. Now I'm part of something that actually matters to people. Miguel raised an eyebrow. Your company matters to people. My company makes money, Lawrence corrected. This place, he gestured around them, this creates joy, preserves history. Passes on knowledge. He shrugged, slightly embarrassed by his own sentimentality. I've made a lot of investments in my life. This is the first one that's given me pride instead of just profit. Before Miguel could respond, Tony hurried over. There you two are. The mayor just arrived and the TV crew wants a statement from both of you. Lawrence sighed dramatically. Duty calls, coming, Miguel. Miguel glanced back at Carlos, who was deep in conversation with Mr. Takashi, both men animated as they discussed the race car. Yes, he said, turning to follow Lawrence and Tony. I'm coming. Later that night, long after the guests had departed, Miguel sat alone in the quiet workshop. The Valencia Mark IV stood before him, a testament to what had been and what could be again. Beside it sat a modern Ferrari waiting for a software update, past and future side by side. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, from racing glory to self-imposed exile, from sweeping floors to building a new legacy, from hiding in shame to standing in the light again. The janitor who fixed a Ferrari in 1 hour had found something far more valuable than recognition or wealth. He had found his way home. If you've enjoyed this story, please don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support makes stories like this possible. Thank you for watching.